And welcome back. We have with us this morning Albert Avila, who is the Community Liaison Officer for the Downtown Rejuvenation Project. And they're going to be talking to us about the 27 historic sites and buildings. Morning.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so could you talk to us about what the project is about?
Let me just go straight into what we want to try to build in downtown. The project name is the Belize City House of Culture and Downtown Rejuvenation Project. And the idea is for us to build what we call an eco-museum in downtown Belize City, which is Albert Street and Regent Street. Let's give you a background on what's an eco-museum. Eco-museum was started in 1971 by a Frenchman named Georges Rivière. And the idea is focus on building a holistic interpretation of cultural history. And he uses both tangible assets, which are sites, buildings, and open spaces, and he combines that with intangible customs and practices. And that eco-museum over the years have evolved into including flora and fauna, natural habitats, and geomorphological sites. But basically,
what is geomorphology?
It's like formation. So you have natural formation, maybe like the Grand Canyon and so forth. They include that in the area. So basically, an eco-museum is a museum, and it's a local area. In our case, it's Albert Street and Regent Street. That will be our eco-museum.
Now, any Belizean, I think, who traverses downtown Belize City, we're not always aware of the history that still exists in these areas. I think some of the iconic sites, like St. John's Cathedral, easily recognized for its history. The Governor's House, or the House of Culture, is easily recognized as well. But there's so many other places just in those two parallel streets that represent a very important part of our history, and that's part of what you try to educate people on. Tell us more about that.
Well, first of all, what's coming up in the next 20 years? 20 years might sound like a long time, but in 2038, Belize is going to celebrate its quadricentennial, which is 400 years since Belize City was discovered. And that's only 20 years away. That's going to be in your time and my time. Hopefully. So we have 20 years to start to plan for that. We don't want to miss it. But apart from
Wait, but the discovery of Belize City, as in when people first arrived to this little point of the country?
When you call, the Buccaneers, there's this person called Peter Wallace that some historians say may not exist, some say exists, but this person with his men came in this area running away from the Spanish, and he settled somewhere on Belize City, this area, in 1638. So since then, we're going on 400 years in 2038, right?
Yeah.
And there are lots of sites in downtown. When we talk about making downtown into an eco-museum, you have to have something to draw people to come into downtown. And the good thing about our eco-museum is it's already there. We don't really have to build it. There are some structures that we're going to build that you have that they're showing up there. Not this particular one, the one before, that we are going to focus on. So because of time, I think we'll go straight into those sites that we're focusing on.
Yeah.
There are 7 locations that we are looking at. Let's start with the Yarborough.
Okay.
Yarborough is a historic site.
Yeah.
That was donated to the settlement by James Dundas Yarborough.
Yeah.
He was an American loyalist. He donated that in 1792. It used to be a plantation, and that was turned into a cemetery.
I was going to ask, when you say Yarborough, we think Yarborough Field as in the football field, but are you referring to Yarborough, the cemetery?
The whole area.
Okay.
So that whole area was that where that structure was part of the cemetery as well.
Wow.
But it was changed to a basketball court. So that plan there that we have for that area is component A and component B. Component A, we built the structure over the basketball court. and we fix the court a little bit, we put the lights and make it a little bit better. Component B is taking the football field and making it a better football field, filling it up, putting in some walkways, putting some chairs, putting some plants, and preserving the coast from erosion.
Does it include any reclamation of the sea because it has come in a little?
That area is already reclaimed. All it needs to do is to have some kind of protection so it doesn't continue to erode. And because of the size of the field, we can't put a normal size regulation football field.
Too small.
So it's going to be like about 75% of a regular field.
Okay, and so that's part of uplifting the area itself. But what about the cemetery? Every time, you know, I think you pass it, you see a couple of graves. People don't understand the history that's there.
Well, you know, you have some dates of people that are buried there from the 1800s.
Yeah.
You know, one of the governor's daughter that died from yellow fever is buried right there. I see we have another picture here. This is another property that the ministry acquired on Coburn Lane. This is Mr. Greenwood's house. And the plan there is that we wanted to preserve that house because of its significance, its architectural significance, but it was too far gone.
Yeah.
So we will replace it with a building that's similar in architectural design, and that will change to a restaurant for cultural cuisine. And we're going to use a portion of it as a little museum to show the work that Mr. Greenwood did, because Mr. Greenwood was very significant in his contribution to Belize.
Where is this house?
This is between Regent Street and Albert Street. That lane is called Coburn Lane. It's right behind ACC.
Okay, okay.
And the street is named after Governor Coburn.
Yeah.
So the building has been removed, and this construction will start later this month to October. So this will be there by the end of the year, early next year. We'll have that property up and running.
So it's going to be owned by the ministry itself.
Right now it's owned by the government of Belize. Government of Belize purchased that property, and we are developing it as part of the project.
And that's where I wanted to go, because I heard you say that, and it's an important point. What this project has allowed for is for the acquisition of unique sites, those that are not already government owned. Talk to us about what's on the list of those that you have acquired. Women's Department, that was a government building already?
This was under the Ministry of Human Development. So we collaborated with them, and the problem is that originally we wanted properties that was privately owned, but it was a lot of trouble getting them. First of all, people weren't coming forward, and the ones that we had looked at, mainly the UC building and Dr. Carl Hushner's house, it was very complicated.
Well, you have to tell us where those buildings are. I don't know where they are.
This is Carl Hushner's right here. This is, I think, Prince and Regent, right across from
That's where the law firm was.
Pardon?
So that's where the law firm was for.
That's where the law firm was, but that's where Carl Hushner lived for 63 years.
It was right up the street from Channel 5 on Regent Street, right next to Belize Bank, on the corner.
And then a little bit down more from Regent Street, across from BTB, is the UC house. And the significance of that goes back to late 1800, mid 1800s.
Near to Wesley.
And it's one of 3 buildings in Belize City that still have the shingles on the sides, and the foundation is made of bricks.
Wow.
And some people believe that below on that first level there, that's where they used to keep some slaves, right?
That's where the story comes from, because we've been hearing that for years about the old Channel 5 building on Regent Street. And we've heard 2 different versions, one that is true, one that it's not.
Well, I was just reading this book, A Walk Through Old Belize, and according to Miss Craig, there were no slaves there. The rings that they found there,
they looked like shackles.
Yeah, but they said it was for mooring of boats, because Regent Street was once very close to the sea. The sea actually came maybe 20 feet away from Regent Street. That whole area is reclaimed land.
Yeah.
So the rings that I haven't personally seen the rings, but I could have seen those rings used to tie boats.
The foreshore didn't exist.
The foreshore didn't exist. It came in from behind courthouse, and it went in, and then it went and it came out back by Government House. So that whole area from where you see Treasury Building all the way to by where BTB office is, that was like a little cove. All of that was.
This is like Marine Parade before Marine Parade.
Yeah. So that was one of the first.
Was it
reclamations.
reclaimed or did it come in naturally with time?
No, that I think it was a Jefferson Company from New Orleans. I think they came in and they filled that property.
Okay, we deviated from your wish list. So this is the house that you said you wanted to acquire.
We couldn't get it. It was too complicated.
Okay.
So we didn't get that. We end up getting the Human Development Building.
Okay.
We couldn't work out the Carl Huschner one either. And so that sort of helped us, the cathedral, because some of the funds that we were going to use for some of these sites were repurposed with the cathedral. The cathedral, as you know, is the oldest historic building in downtown.
Yeah.
And
they were fundraising for repairs.
and it costs a lot of money to really repair the building.
Yeah.
So
This is the rendering of which?
this one is the building that we're going to replace the Human Development Building with. So it's going to be a 3-story building. That's the purple building that you just saw. It'll be 3 stories. The ground floor will be used for women, to train women, to teach them how to do crafts and so forth. The second floor will be used by the women's department for offices. And then the third floor will be training centers for the community.
And even though the rendering looks that way, will it be wooden?
No, it's going to be concrete. It's going to be a concrete structure.
How does that?
Because we have to look at the durability. So it's all of the buildings are going to be concrete structures, but we're going to try, as far as how it looks outside, we're going to try and keep that English colonial look. And that's why it has the verandas and the
the shutter windows,
shutters, and the roof, the hip roof.
Yeah.
This one is hard for me to swallow though, because it's hard for me to take the imagery of a colonial house being concrete, because we weren't using concrete back in 1817, whatever. And there is material that appears to be
what
wood.
we are doing is that
isn't.
if we find the house that's already, like for example, if we had gotten the UC house, that wasn't going to be torn down. That was going to be repaired, and it would have continued to be a wooden structure. But for example, the Frederick, Mr. Greenwood's property was too far gone, so we had to remove it. But if it was a building that we could have preserved, it would have stayed as a wooden structure. Now this was
Supreme Court.
funds we had, which was repurposed to the courthouse, because the courthouse, the roof was leaking, and so we refurbished the ceiling for courthouse.
It had mold.
Pardon?
It had mold and it was rotting. The
Yes,
windows are.
water was dropping on the judge's
it
head.
was in bad,
So
really bad shape.
we did the ceiling there. We did the roof for courtroom 2 and 8 from the Supreme Court. So it's in a little bit better shape now.
I'm going through the list very quickly, and you're right, there are a lot to go through. Mule Park, for example, has already been refurbished a bit and I think a lot of people know it exists, maybe they don't know what for. Battlefield Park as well. But I want to talk about Paslow Building, because we refer to it now as Ground Zero.
Well,
what's going to happen there?
A part of the plan was we were supposed to do something with the commercial center, which was the old fish market.
Yeah.
But that took too long to come about. So that, again, we had to repurpose, and so we had to go across the river. Originally, we wanted to do everything on the south side.
Yeah.
So the next historic site was where Paslow was. Unfortunately, we wanted to rebuild Paslow, but Paslow would have cost like 2 or 3 times the budget we had. So what's going to happen there is we're going to build a 2-story structure. We had an engagement meeting with stakeholders about a month ago. And what they said is that if you're going to build a structure there for vendors, you need to have parking. You can't have parking. You can't have vendors and no parking. And you know the situation with downtown. You can't find parking. So what we're going to do there is when you come over the bridge, it'll look like a solid building, but it'll basically be like a L. So Northfront Street and Queen Street.
And behind it we'll have
So it'll
parking.
be like that. So on the back section will be for parking. there'll be an open space for maybe a stage, people want to do performances and so forth, that'll be there.
Is it going to look anything like the original Paslow?
We're going to use the same architectural, colonial, English colonial designs.
Yeah.
It hasn't been, the renderings are not
Okay.
completed yet. So,
Okay.
but that's the way Taiwan is working with us very closely, and they are insisting that it looks something similar to that,
Yeah.
to keep that colonial
Yeah.
structure.
Let's go right up the street from Paslow to Turton Building. Turton Library, sorry.
Certain library.
Okay, well, the library is not in our scope. It's a
Okay.
historic building,
Okay.
but it's not one of our buildings that we're going to
You're
touch.
going to work on, but it
No.
is a historic site.
It is a historic building. I think that goes all the way back to I think the Bills, if I'm not mistaken, they used to own that building. You had Dr. Cran. Dr. Cran used to own the building next to Wellworth. That was his private house. And his daughter or somebody used to live right where that building
Why
was.
is it not in the scope, as you say?
The pardon?
Why is it not in the scope?
Because originally the Eco Museum is mainly Albert Street and Regent Street.
Okay.
Oh,
Right?
yes.
Okay.
So those are the areas. And we
So
have
they're
limited
listed
funds.
as historical sites because they are.
Yeah, this
But
historical site.
your focus is Albert Street and
Albert Street and
Regent
Regent
Street. So
Street.
let's go back to Albert Street and Regent Street. James Brodie's and Company is a historic site.
Yeah. People don't realize it because it has been observed in our culture and our
Yeah.
history, but
And it
James
doesn't look that
Brodie
different.
came in 1872, and by 1875 he and Mr. Cuthbert went into business to start Brodie's, and I think by 1880, mid 1880s, he had established a Brodie's in the UK, in England, right? And of course, Brodie's has gone from one owner to the next owner, and they have continued with the name Brodie's.
I'm just looking at the scale of it, and back in those days, this must have been
And
a
it still has
skyscraper.
a lot of the historical structures. I was in there the other day, and some of the rafters look like they are original. They go all the way back.
One of the things on the list is the statue in Yarborough for Isaiah Mortar. What will be done to it? Will it be replaced?
Nothing's going to be done to it. That statue will continue to be there. It's a significant statue. Mr. Mortar represents his parents. He was born in 1866, 1867, and he was a child of parents that used to live in Ibo Town, and Ibo Town is one of our historic sites. And the significance for him is that he was one of Belize's first millionaire.
Yeah.
He inherited some properties from his godfather. He went into banana, made a lot of money, and he had amassed enough money where he actually owned Key Chapel at one point, where he had a coconut plantation.
And he was black.
And he was black. He's of Igbo. His parents were Igbo.
So what will be done to it? It will be like Mule Park. It will be upgraded.
It'll continue to be like that, and where we can fix it up and make it a little bit better, we will do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you said the Ibo Town jurisdiction, we have it here listed as one of the sites. What's going to be done?
The Ibo location it starts at the corner opposite the Wesley Church, Albert Street, South Street. It goes all the way to the canal, then to Berkeley, and it comes up. The significance about that, in the early 1700s, that is where the Africans, the enslaved Africans and free Africans all lived. There were like maybe 5,000 people. Wow. We don't have any pictures, we don't have any drawings. If Carolyn Carr is looking at this, I had asked her to do a rendition of that for me, and she promised she was going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we need something to show people what it looked like. All we know is that it was sort of like a long barracks with lots of divisions where people used to live. But the significance about that property is that when we look at the Creole culture, the music, the dancing, the food,
That's where it
all
started.
came from that, because that's where a lot of the African tribes live. And during Christmas, they came and they did their dancing and their feasting, and that's where the Christmas Bram actually
fascinating.
came
Yeah.
from.
Miss Myrna can help you?
Someone must have a photo somewhere.
Not really. It doesn't exist. Somebody will have to go and do their interpretation of what
Okay.
that place used to look like.
Wow. Wow.
Can I ask this general question though? Because I have a friend of mine who is against the nostalgic wave to colonialism, and his argument against it is really that, you know, we should be looking at what culture is right now rather than trying to go back to dig up all of these horrible memories. Mr. Paslow was not a nice man. I mean, he owned slaves, and I know Dickey was famous for being very critical of him. And, you know, all of these odes to colonialism and slavery, it doesn't seem to bode well to suggest that, you know, we've moved past it to a place where it's a healthy
Well-
thing. Why are we saluting something which is not a kumbaya moment?
Well, what you have to look at is that whichever side of the fence we are on, whether we are, some people like colonial, some people don't like the colonialism, it's our history. And we can't run from it. And when we look at the Eco Museum, when we talk, because remember the Eco Museum is to attract visitors, not
Yeah.
only local visitors, but foreigners. When they come, they want to know about our history, right? And that's what's going to draw tourists into downtown. They want to know the history. And that same colonialism is a major part of our history. And we need to tell the story about that. We can't continue to put our head in the ground and forget that it happened. We have to face it. And a lot of our culture and our history and the way we are, who we are, is based on that. You
That's
know,
what Battlefield Park used to look like?
this is Battlefield Park.
Yeah.
This is how it used to look probably before 1920s, because the courthouse now, there was a wooden courthouse before the current courthouse.
down.
That was burned down in 1918, and that one actually killed Governor Hart Bennett, because the flagpole fell and knocked him in his head. So the new courthouse was built of concrete in the same structure, right?
Same style.
So this one, I suspect, this may have already been the concrete structure. This is not the wooden structure.
And what a lot of people don't know is that the National Assembly was in what is called the Treasury Building, which is to the...
Possibly, right now I'm currently looking for historical information about the Treasury.
Yeah.
We know the courthouse, but we don't really know the Treasury yet, what was in there originally and so forth.
So it's not true that where the Chief Justice Chambers
was
is,
in there?
where the current Chief Justice Chambers is, used to be the house. That's not correct?
I am not sure. We have to do research on that. That
So we
has
don't
to
have
be-
information to validate
I
it yet.
don't have I
Yeah.
don't have the information yet.
Interesting.
I've
The Prime
asked
Minister's
ISCR
office,
to do
the
to
Prime
do-
Minister's office definitely was up there though.
Yes, George Price's office was in the courthouse.
Sure.
In that part
Upstairs
of
are where we do Bolido now.
it. If that's where you did the Bolita, then it was up there. And he used to come down on those steps. That's where they used to
The
have the
courthouse.
political.
The
courthouse.
Prime Minister used to be in the courthouse.
In the courthouse.
This building,
Yeah.
This is the courthouse. This is the Supreme
The
Court.
center
right?
building is the courthouse.
Wow.
The one on the right is Treasury.
As
But you
far
see,
as I
that's what
understand, George
happens.
Price's office used to be in there.
But this is what's fascinating, because I think what Kevin highlights is what all of us think. We have anecdotal information that we don't really even know what's true and what's not.
I like to double as much as I can, and there's a historian in Belize who works at the court building, who I think we should freeze him, and his name is Mr. Pennell, and he's a legal historian. He knows everything about what happens in the courts, and I think if it's not from him, but I confirmed from him that in fact it was not the courthouse building, but it was in fact the Treasury Building upstairs.
In the courthouse building.
Yes, where Mr. Price's office was upstairs.
In the courthouse building.
No, in
In
the
the
Treasury
Treasury
building.
Building.
Yes. So
Yeah.
Possibly.
it's going to be interesting to
We're
uncover.
gonna,
have to-
we're gonna
Yeah.
ask somebody.
we have to do
But you know what's
more,
great?
research
We
on
put
that.
it out there. Somebody will be able to dig up
Exactly.
some old records and let us know for sure. So we're still, from what you're saying, is we still don't have data, and that's what you
No,
need
I
the
don't
data
have. I don't have the
Yeah.
data on the
on the use of the
that,
Treasury
that particular
Building.
the Treasury
Yeah.
Building. And maybe even the courthouse.
You need
stuff.
to, Mr. Penela sure can tell you and probably give you pictures as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Edmund Pennell.
moving on from this area, we have a couple of other places that are highlighted. There's a Honduras free school.
The Honduras Free School. That goes back to
Free, not pre. Free.
because 12 children of free Africans went to school there, and that location was right across from ACC, across the street, right at the corner where you have a purple. It's a little bit more on this side, a purple building.
Yeah.
That's exactly where it was. Now this site is a little bit farther up, where the soup kitchen for the Anglican diocese is located. We're building an urban garden there with the
Okay.
school, and it'll be the first urban garden in Downtown Belize City.
Okay.
And that's going to be built right here on October, end of September to October. It'll be operated by the students. We're going to train the students how to operate it. And we think it's a good synergy because you have the soup kitchen which feeds the homeless, and we're a better place to put it, right there. And then we're going to build a restaurant at Coburn Lane, where it's going to be a restaurant. The idea is that's going to be a restaurant with cultural cuisine, and we could use some of the vegetables there. And we will see how we can tie that into the human development building once we start to develop the programming for that.
The way Belize City is growing, it's kind of outgrowing downtown area. How do you think that will factor into the plans that you have for this museum?
Well,
Because the center of town now is Coney Drive and
what's
Big Mirror
happening
Building.
is that a very unusual thing is happening in Belize, as compared to other countries where people move from rural area to urban area. That's what happens. Rural move to urban for work and to live. In Belize, it's the opposite. People going from the urban, which we say downtown, to rural. So, and they're not coming back because they can't afford it. There's no work. So what we hope will happen is that with this eco-museum, once we can draw tourists in the area, this will stimulate more businesses. Because if you go back to the 60s and the 70s, downtown had a variety of business. Currently, it's just textile, right?
Yeah.
But if you went back to the 60s and 70s, you had a bakery, you had a bar, you had a leather stain, you had a shoe place, you had right down. No, it's gone. So hopefully, with this eco-museum, tourists will start coming in the area to see the historic sites, to see the cultural presentations. This will bring restaurants and new business into downtown. And this will hopefully eventually draw some of the people that have moved out to come back in. And hopefully give jobs to the members of people from the south side, because the main objective of the eco-museum is to enhance the development and the welfare of the community in
Now,
that area.
Albert, the burning question I imagine here is, how can we afford the reacquisition and the rebuilding and the restructuring of all these sites that we've spoken about so far?
This is from a loan that the government of Belize has gotten from Taiwan. So you're looking at about $10 million from Taiwan and the government giving $5 million. So we're looking at a budget of $50 million. And although it sounds like a lot of money, by the time you look at all that needs to be done, it's not a lot. So what's going to happen is that with this project, we're going to get the physical infrastructure in place.
Yeah.
We don't really have the funds to get into the cultural aspect. I am in charge of the soft component, which is more cultural capacity building and so forth, which is a small budget. That will certainly need maybe a follow-up project to really expand on that, to bring the physical with the culture together.
Now, as somebody so involved with this project, tell me which one of these sites has been the most surprising to you?
When you say surprising, what do you mean?
Maybe you didn't know the historical significance, the cultural significance.
Okay. Mr. Greenwood's property.
Yeah.
I was reading his biography the other day, and he is such an interesting person. He was an Englishman. He lived there for 30-odd years, and I personally went in that building before it was torn down, and I actually found some of his drawings in there.
Wow.
'Cause he was a planner. And when you look at some of those plans that he had there, obviously the man was a visionary. Some of those things that he had drawn still don't exist yet. There was a plan in there for a tropical hydroelectric plant over the Barrier Reef. He had the designs for that. He had done a cultural plaza for where the Mexican Cultural Institute is by Wilson Street. He had done a plan for that. That wasn't implemented. And he also did some drawings for various urban areas.
Can I ask this? If we're going this direction in terms of preserving these colonial treasures, architectural treasures, there are some buildings which don't fall in the South Side project, but they are masterpieces of colonial design. I mean, I could remember one of my favorites was on Barak Road, beside where the bank is. There was a beautiful, I think it burnt down, but there was a beautiful colonial structure. There's another one on the seafront.
Chateau Caribbean was a big
Caribbean
loss.
was
another
Was a big
beautiful one.
loss.
But is there legislation to sort of restrict the alterations to these colonial buildings around the city? Is there, first of all?
One of the big objectives of this project was to improve on the national historic legislation for archaeological sites. You have some that are hundreds years old, like the Mayas, but you have some that are like maybe 50 to 100, and we didn't have any legislation for that. So this new legislation, which was passed last year, I think August, will help us
What's
to
the
be
name of
able
it?
to preserve some of these buildings.
What's the name of the legislation?
It's just, we refer to it as the National Historic Legislation of Belize.
Do you think, and I wanted to go in a similar vein, but just some people still own very colonial-like properties. Are there incentives for them in upkeep? Because wooden houses are expensive to upkeep. And I think in a time when everybody's talking about climate change and durability and resilience to storms, it's quite natural that people will want to change.
For example, you look at some of the houses on Regent Street. Right after Irma, you have two of them where they have a accountant, chartered accountant, and another one, a yellow one, where the tourism police is. Those buildings were renovated, but when the renovation is done, they don't really take into consideration the architectural features and so forth. It looks nice now, right? And that's what we have to be very careful when we look at some of these old buildings, that we don't just renovate them to renovate them, that we try to maintain how it was built, to try and keep it as close as possible to the way it looked when it was.
One of them was demolished. You had where the BTB is, I think, and then there's a boutique and then a law firm, and then there was a white one for sale.
There have been
demolished within the past 6 to 8
Emery
months.
King building, which was behind Atlantic Bank, where the parking area is. That's where Emery King building was. That shouldn't have been knocked down. That should have been preserved, because Emery King historically is significant, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at the old pictures on Regent Street, all those beautiful, large 2-3 story colonial houses are all gone now. They're not coming back.
I know you very clearly said that the work you're doing is primarily downtown Belize City. That's what you're budgeted for. But this is a part of a larger kind of historical preservation. We were just showing an interview with George Price and in his home itself. And I've always wondered what is going to happen with that house. It's of historical significance, not just because of the structure that it is, but because George Price lived there.
Well, yeah, that house definitely has to be preserved. But if you look at the Philip Golson house in Belmopan, that was acquired by the government.
Yeah.
And And I went there, and it's a very nice representation of
How did they miss the
Folsom
list?
House.
How did Mr. Price's house?
No, because this is downtown.
You reached across the bridge already, though.
That's it's still
Pastor.
privately owned, so
Substitute to the family or something?
it's the the family own it, and I'm sure the family is not just going to give it up
Oh,
just like
no.
that. But what happened with the national historic legislation is that it does give the government the power to go and say, okay, that house is cultural,
Declare
has
it.
cultural historic significance,
Yeah.
and this is what you can do with it, right?
Yeah.
You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this,
Yeah.
and that's what the
at the
legislation does to help us preserve it.
Yeah.
But having the legislation is one thing, and have the will to carry it out and the funds to carry it
Yeah.
out is another issue, right?
Can I ask
Okay.
this in terms of, you have little sprinklings here and there, but are there enough to make a dent to be noticed? Because you have one over here, one over there. Are these renovations sufficient to create something that we can?
You know, the whole idea of the eco-museum is normally a bottom-up process where members of the community see a historic house, a historic church or something, and they come together and they say, we want to preserve it. And then they go to they come together, they go to the municipality, say, we want to preserve this building. Please give us this building, and we're going to preserve it. But that's where in the community, you already have a high level of preservation. The community have the preservation. In Belize, our process, we're going from the top down. It's an initiative of the Ministry of Tourism. And we don't have a culture of preservation.
Yeah.
So we have to create the culture of preservation. And that's why, from my standpoint, when we do the history and social studies competition, we do Christmas in the park, and those initiatives
Yeah.
is to try and show the public why these things are important for us, why we need to preserve.
Yeah.
of
It comes
these
back to what Marlene says in terms of to restore and maintain a wooden building.
It's very
extremely
expensive.
expensive.
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
And there are no incentives. For example, a tax cut. If I have a colonial building, I already can't change my window. I can't go to the Mennonite community and buy a window and stuck it in. And so it costs me more. So I must have some benefit or incentive.
Yeah.
And that is something easy to put in legislation.
Well,
Tax break?
I'm not sure if the legislation go into that detail,
Should.
but there has to be, I think it will be developed over time. Remember, we have 700 historical colonial buildings all over Belize City.
Wow.
So the idea is, obviously we don't have the funds for all of that, and the people that own those property don't have the funds.
Yeah.
So there will be, like you said, we're going to have to handpick it,
Yeah.
and then use the limited funds to preserve those buildings. It's not going to be, we're going to lose a lot of it.
Yeah.
We have to realize that.
That's
We're going to
unfortunate.
lose it.
But we thank you for coming in and giving us this historical look at Belize City. And I think that definitely we look forward to seeing some of the renovations and the rebuilding that you've spoken of. And we appreciate the update on the project as well.
Well, we thank you for having us again so we can share what's happening, because I think we are going into the exciting part
Yeah.
of this project where we actually will see
Yeah.
buildings going up.
All right. Thank you, Albert.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we will be focusing on George Price's legacy and National Service Day. So stay tuned.